Hello, hello. Great to have everybody here today. My name is Kelvin Chin, and today is the first Sunday of the month of May. It's May 5th, 2024, and we are going to be doing these monthly sessions um, live here on Zoom, and I'll do it on Facebook Live as well. So people can eavesdrop and join if they want to there. But if you want to ask questions and um, be a little bit more engaged in the conversation, these discussions, I suggest that you log on to the Zoom link that's in the event page. And you can find the event page either on Facebook, my Facebook, or you can find the way to register and get the Zoom link for these meetings on my website, kelvinchin.org, kelvinchin.org. And you'll find the page there where you can click on it and you can register and get the Zoom link. Once you have the Zoom link for these meetings, just keep it. It'll be the same Zoom link I'm using for these monthly sessions that we're calling the Living More Happily Monthly Forum. And I want to thank some of my students, Chelsea and Allison, and Amy, who have helped me think through, Michaela helped me think through this idea of doing this monthly session with folks. The idea, let me just kind of give you an overview, and then we'll talk, and then I'll introduce some ideas to discuss today. But these is going to be kind of monthly informal discussion sessions, basically. And I'll start each of these sessions with a little bit of a 15, 20-minute kind of talk on a certain topic and so forth. And then we'll open it up for discussion with everybody. And because that's where the rubber meets the road. You know, I want to help people assimilate these concepts and ideas and principles in their consciousness so that then you can take these and live these in your life going forward. You know, it's not just about sitting around reading books or going to workshops and then going out doing the same old stuff and then making the same mistakes in our life. That's not the road to happiness, is it? Again, the key word is principles. That's what we're going to be discussing here is our principles of what we could call the inherent patterns that exist, I think, in the universe. And I'll be drawing from my own experience this lifetime. And those of you know that my memories go back 6,000 years. I'm drawing from everything because everything has affected me and still educates me, you could say, from all my past experiences, including my past experiences this lifetime, as all of us are educated and affected by all of our past experiences, I think. So when I talk about principles, I'm talking about principles of inherent patterns that seem to be universal. And we'll get into that through these monthly sessions. That's, to me, understanding these inherent patterns and the principles that are involved in these inherent patterns in the universe, including our minds, which is part of the universe, if you hadn't noticed, is the road to happiness. That's and how we apply that in our daily lives, right? That's where the rubber meets the road. But my focus in these monthly sessions is going to be on the principles, less so on the applications. Are we going to talk about the applications, how to apply these in our daily lives? Yes, to some degree, of course. We're going to dance with the application side of the equation, of course. And I want to hear from each of you in these discussions how you have wrestled with the application of these different principles that we're going to talk about in these sessions. But the thing is, I want people to understand so that your expectations in these sessions are met. We all have reasonable expectations about what we're going to come out of these sessions with. These are not sessions to compare different cultures or religions' views on these various principles. Okay? We'll dance with that a little bit here and there, but this is not an academic class, is what I'm saying. Okay? This is a practical, these are going to be practical discussions about these principles and how we can apply them in our daily lives. Because figuring out how that culture in this part of history and that religion in this part of history going back a gajillion years, millennia, that's an endless task, and that's not where I want to focus. Those of you who've read anything about me, or if you just know anything about me generally from having worked with me, know that I'm a pragmatist. I have a very practical side. If you've read anything in my third book, that's one of the about my memories that go back 6,000 years. That's one of the personality traits for me of me that's loud and clear. So I want these sessions to be practical. You know, how can you walk away, hopefully, from each of these monthly sessions that we have with something that you're going to use and apply in your daily lives is going to make you a happier person. I mean, that's the way I'm looking at this anyway. Okay. So what do we mean by happiness? Let's talk about, since this is the Living More Happily monthly forum, let's start off today just talking about the concept of happiness specifically. So what do we mean by happiness? Well, some people, you know, do we mean by happiness walking around with a smile on your face all the time? No. I mean, you could say, yeah, that's a sign of somebody who's happy. But that, to me, that's what a child may think of as happiness. But I think that hopefully by now, as adults, you know, we have a more mature and developed way of defining happiness. All right, so let's talk about that. Contentment, inner peace. That's the way I kind of have distilled this down. I'm just going to plant a bunch of bullet point thoughts with you, and I want to hear from all of you who are live here with me on the Zoom session. I want to hear from all of you folks, you know, what do you think? What do you think about this concept of happiness, et cetera? Because if you're thinking about it in the kind of, I think the way that a lot of people think about it is seriously, like walking around with a smile on your face, as the metric, as the measurement of whether you're a happy person or not, you're going to fail because you're not always happy in that way all the time. Sometimes you're sad, right? And so people will draw a contrast between happiness and sadness, and I understand that contrast. However, I have a much broader sense of how I'm going to be defining happiness in this monthly forum. And if you've read any of the essays in this book, my second book, Marcus Aurelius Updated, these 67 essays, you'll see that the whole book is about increasing our happiness. Whether the essay itself is talking about happiness or not, everything in that book is about improving the quality of our life. And improving the quality of our life, to me, is about happiness. And I think about it as I said, as contentment, feeling inwardly comfortable and contented and at peace within myself. That's how I view happiness. And the example I give sometimes in my classes is, you know, I went to my uncle's funeral a couple of years ago, and I was sad at my uncle's funeral. But there was a quality of my consciousness, we could say, that I brought to that funeral that I bring to wherever I am in life, whether it's at the YMCA where I go swimming, or whether it's at the giant supermarket where I go shopping, or at Trader Joe's, or at my uncle's funeral. There's a quality of my consciousness that I would define as inwardly content and at peace. And to me, that's a more complete, a more developed way of looking at happiness, because I was sad at my uncle's funeral. And yet there's a quality of my consciousness that I'm calling a happiness quotient that was there even though I was sad. So I think happiness and sadness, in the way that I'm defining happiness there, can go along with each other at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive, like the way most people view happiness. And we'll get into this more in these monthly series. But why do we seek happiness? Generally, I think it's because it makes us feel good, right? I mean, just to be very direct and very simple. Because what does it show us? It shows us that we're doing stuff, whatever it is, the stuff is, that fulfills us. And what's fulfillment, really? It's about desires. We have desires. We have hopes, wishes, and dreams, we could call them. Desires. But are our desires fulfilled? And so the more alignment we can have with our desires, between our desires and our thoughts, our actions, our behavior, then the more we're going to feel fulfilled. I think we would probably all agree to that, right? That's what fulfillment of desires means. And so the more we fulfill our desires, the happier we are. I think probably everybody would agree to that, right? And so, but the key, where's the rubber meet the road, as they say in English, and those of you from around the world, what that phrase means is it has to do with a car and a tire on the road. And that's the rubber of the tire. And that's when you can move forward, is when the tire is on the road. If the tire is lifted up off the road, you're not going to go anywhere. So the phrase means, what can we do? What it means in this context is, what can we do to move our lives forward, propel our lives forward, so that we can more likely fulfill our desires? Happiness, in other words. Okay? So, and when we don't, we become sad. To me, that's a more developed way of looking at the concept of happiness than just having a smile on your face. Okay? Or not having a smile on your face. Another key concept that plays a big role in that equation that I just laid out for you, is the idea of control. And you've heard me say this many times, and I've been saying this and teaching this principle for 2,000 years. You can go back and read some of the stuff that I was writing 2,000 years ago. And I've been saying it this lifetime, even before I realized that I had that past life memory. And that's control what we can control and let go of what you cannot control. That general principle. And you can say that principle in different ways, but that's as succinctly as I say it now today in 21st century Kelvin Chin lifetime. Control what we can control and let go what you can't control. And it's easily said. It's not as easily practiced, right? But to move forward in our lives more in that direction. And that's what I'm going to be doing monthly with you guys, is giving chatting with you and discussing and interacting with you. I want this to be an interactive discussion about these principles to help us move forward more in that direction. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody's got it all down. Okay? We're all a work in progress. But these are what I initially called these inherent principles that can help propel us forward if we understand them clearly enough, and then we obviously start applying them in our lives. A couple of last points on, and then we'll open it up to discussion, is desires. So when I talk about desires, I mentioned hopes, dreams, expectations. On page 35 in this book, I want to just read you something that from one of the essays, just like 2 sentences or a sentence or two here. On page 35, if you have this, the paperback version, it's the, if you have the ebook, it's the can you sprint your way to happiness? It's in this essay, but it's in the middle of the essay somewhere. And I talk about desires here. And I'll lead you into this by reading the sentence before. Why are we Americans so enamored with the short-term fix, the quick jolt of bliss? You hear that all the time, right? Versus long-term contentment. I think we have largely forgotten who we are. We're not consumers. We're not even Americans. We are minds with desires. And we would serve our own happiness more effectively if we looked more closely at why we have those desires, what drives them, and what therefore drives us. All right? So that's all I wanted to read from that essay, just to set up this next point, which is about desires. I think one threshold thing to do to kind of cleanse your mind, our minds, when we're thinking about happiness, and specifically when we're thinking about desires, is the possible and the impossible, right? So you could fantasize about having a desire that's impossible. Like, I really wish I could go to Neptune, and experience what the environment on the planet Neptune is like. I have this desire, you could say. But that's an impossible. I think most of us, maybe not everybody, but I think most people, assuming your name is not Elon Musk, would assume that that is an impossible desire to have, all right? So let's focus on the possible desires, right? Focus on what's possible and what's healthy for us. That's my suggestion. And the other point about desires and fulfillment of desires in this context of discussion about happiness is to use yourself as a metric. Don't use other people's lives to measure yourself against. Because I always say, those of you who've been in my classes, you've heard me say this phrase many, many times. I say, as compared to what? Susan, you've heard me say this a million times. Like, I say, as compared to what? We need to have a reference point. And I think the healthiest reference point when we're dealing with our own self-development is to look at ourselves first. Yes, you can, I'm not saying never to measure yourself against somebody is outside yourself or something that's outside yourself. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the focus, the emphasis should be on comparing ourselves with ourselves. And the more consciously we are aware of and honest with, candid with, which is a tough one. I fully admit that based on my own experience going back 6,000 years. Being candid with ourselves, honest with ourselves about the good, bad, and the ugly that we see about ourselves, that's a tough one. But the more candid we are, I think the more honest we are, the more accurate we're going to be, and more effective we're going to be about using ourselves as a metric and moving forward in a healthier direction. I think of, some of I grew up in Boston, and so I was, when Brady was a Patriot, I was a Patriots fan. I've kind of divorced myself emotionally more from NFL football these days since he retired. But when Tom Brady came into the NFL, those of you who don't know, he was a quarterback for the Patriots. He's considered by many people, everybody, but many people, to perhaps be so far the greatest quarterback, at least, and maybe the greatest NFL football player ever, based at least on his winning of championships and his leadership of the team. But when he came into the league, the NFL, he was 199th pick in the 2000 year draft. He didn't come in comparing himself to everybody else. That's why I'm using him as an example. He didn't come in saying, I'm going to be the best quarterback in NFL history. He made improving himself on a daily and consistent basis as his personal goal. And so that's my suggestion. And I'm not saying you can't dream big. You can dream big like all the social media memes will tell you. But if you never do the work and you're not candid about yourself, you're not going to really move forward. And as I said at the beginning, I'm Mr. Practical, and I want to help you guys move forward in a practical way. So, as I said, or as I implied anyway, this is not going to be your normal workshop about happiness where the facilitator is going to get up in front of the group and just lead a cheerleading session and tell everybody that all you have to do is believe in yourself. Because most of you who are watching this and here in the class do believe in yourself, at least to a great degree. Nobody's perfect. Nobody believes in themselves on every score. But most of you have already gone down that road, believing in yourself. And yet you're looking for more. You're looking for something that's going to deliver more. My experience over the last 6,000 years is that belief alone is a drop in the bucket in terms of the road to happiness. And that understanding these underlying principles is the key. That's been what's working for me for the last 6,000 years anyway. And so I hope that this kind of gives you an overview of where we want to go, a little bit of some introductory concepts that we can discuss. I'll give you an idea of where I want to go with some other topics, and you guys can feel free to email me and text me other concepts, ideas you want to talk about in these sessions. So it doesn't only have to be concepts and ideas out of this book, out of my Marcus Aurelius updated book, but there's a lot of stuff in here to talk about already. And in the future sessions, some of the, I just made a quick list here and I'll read to you. Some of the other concepts that I want to talk about in these future monthly sessions is the idea of obedience. I want to spend a whole session talking about obedience and obedience as a vice. Obedience is one of the most damaging, deleterious concepts for human consciousness in terms of increasing suffering and reducing happiness on so many levels. So we're going to talk about obedience in one session. I'm going to talk about, we're going to discuss forgiveness in another session. And enlightenment, the concept of enlightenment. Somebody had asked about that. So we're going to talk about this idea of enlightenment and people awakening more to their own conscious awareness and so forth. And we're going to talk about that. Another session, we'll talk about cruelty. And another session, we'll talk about the purpose in life, because people are very curious about their purpose, etc., and how does that fit with what they're doing and so forth. And another session, we'll talk about the concepts of intention, intending to do something, as well as negligently acting. Okay, negligent means you didn't intend it, but you didn't act consciously enough, so you hurt a bunch of people or a person. All right? That's what negligence means. So there's intention, where you actually meant to do something, good or bad. It doesn't have to be always a negative thing, positive or negative. You intended, you meant to do it. And then there's negligence, where you didn't intend to do that hurtful thing, but you did. So we're going to talk a session about that. So these are concepts that it gives you an idea of how I'm thinking about these monthly sessions, because these are all important concepts. And if we don't understand the underlying principles that drive those different concepts, we will not lead a happy and fulfilled life or as happy and fulfilled a life as we possibly could. And I'm all about improving that, increasing that as much as possible. Okay. The last thing I want to say to you, and then we'll open it up to to the questions and discussion for the last part of our session here together, is I had lunch yesterday with one of my students, and those of you know I have students in 68 countries. Most of the time, I'm meeting my students like this on Zoom or on the phone or on WhatsApp or whatever, if they're international students. But I had the rare occurrence yesterday of, since I'm on the East Coast traveling, one of my students took an Uber up and we had lunch together in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, where I'm staying for the next month or so. On the way up, he had this book in his Uber for his hour drive up from Philadelphia to meet me for lunch. And he said the following to me, which I wanted to share with you, which I thought was very interesting. He said he was reading in this Uber, Uber, for those of you who don't know what Uber is, it's basically a taxi, so he's not driving, okay? He's the passenger sitting in the back seat. And he had plenty of time. He had an hour to read essays out of this purple book. And what he noticed was, he said to me, and I don't think anybody has ever said this way to me before, who's read the book. And I've had like 50 people who've reviewed the book and told me what they've said. He said he noticed when he started reading the essays that there were so many concepts and so many principles and ideas in each essay. And some of the essays, those of you who haven't checked out this book yet, some of the essays are they're like this long. Look at it. That's how long the essay is. That's the whole essay. It's a page. And this is not even a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper page. This is it's like the equivalent of a third of a page on a, printout. Anyway, he said he was reading the essays, and what he realized, there was so much stuff in each of the paragraphs of the essays that he had to read really slowly, and he had to go back and read it again. And he had to stop and think about the concept that was in that one paragraph. So he didn't read very many essays in that hour ride up from Philadelphia, but he thought a lot. That's how I want these sessions. I'm using him as an example, but that's how I want these, how I envision anyway, these sessions to go. We're going to talk we're going to talk about a lot of different concepts, but I hope when you come away from them, you have that reaction that he had, that, well, I got to think about that. I got to spend some time thinking about that. Because if you do, like I have for 6,000 years myself, that I have memory of, it will serve you well, because then you start to really assimilate the stuff on an emotional level, not just intellectual thoughts in your head, but viscerally. When I say emotionally, it starts to change your emotional pattern as it relates to these different concepts, and it will change your behavior, because that's where our desires are residing from. They're starting in our emotional patterns, right? Emotions, desires, and so forth. And then they will manifest from there. So the more we can really assimilate these ideas, concepts, really wrap our minds around them, the more it's going to serve you in this lifetime and all your other future lifetimes, whether your lifetimes are on the other side and you hang out there for hundreds or thousands of years in heaven, or whether you decide to come back sometime here on planet Earth or wherever. Okay? So there you go. So questions, comments, tell me what you guys think about. Let's start there. How have you viewed the concept of happiness? Any of you? Go ahead. Susan?
I actually have a question.
Sure.
When you're talking about desires, it sounded like you were talking about, I'll call it physical world desires, like doing something, going somewhere, achieving something. Is that what you meant? Or did you mean, did you include internal desire to grow and change emotionally and stuff like that?
All of the above, everything, including what you said. The internal, to be more self-aware, that's a desire. That's a desire to be more
Okay.
self-aware. But it's the same process, because then you have thoughts, actions, and behavior that have to follow that desire
Mhm.
to be more self-aware person in order to become a more self-aware person, in order to fulfill that desire of becoming a more self-aware person. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, absolutely includes all of the above. When I say desires, I'm using broadest sense, and however, you know, manifesting, or and
I
including
get it.
physical world too as well. I was saying both of what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. How do you view happiness, Susan? Well, since you're unmuted and we're
Okay. Well,
share, and there's no right and wrong to this either, right? So
yeah,
I'm just curious. So go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah,
I know. Um, I'm in a particular moment in my life where I've been feeling anxious for whatever reason. So for me, happiness would be just not feeling the anxiety and just feeling a sense of well-being and just a sense of like going about life without that underlying nagging discomfort.
yeah,
But I have a memory too, so I know what it was like when I wasn't feeling anxious. I mean, I would define happiness. Well, I think the basic is like a sense of well-being. Like I'm okay, I'm not upset, I'm just even keel, not having huge emotional swings. Um, and then there are things such as having good relationships with the people who are close to me, um, feeling intellectually stimulated by things that I'm learning, having interests in things. I mean, now I'm just talking about things that make me happy.
sure. Well, that's what I was
Having a
asking.
Cadillac convertible, just kidding.
No, I seriously meant, I was asking you that. Yeah, no, yeah.
Um,
No, that's beautiful. So
being healthy, that's
being
important.
healthy, yeah. So, there's no right and wrong here. That's what I'm saying. I'm just curious to hear how different people are viewing this and what lens you're looking through, et cetera, et cetera. And you shared very candidly that, and I appreciate that, the candor, that right now you're feeling a little anxious and so forth, going through a period in your life, et cetera. And so that feeling less anxious would be an immediate, something that's more immediate in your life, that you would feel like, well, if I could fulfill that desire, you would feel an immediate relief, let's just say, right? And
Right.
more well-being. And it's nicely said the way you said it. Just more generally, more well-being, increased well-being, more. It's great. And you called it a basic kind of a fundamental kind of thing. And I think that, in my experience anyway, that's also been my experience. You guys know my history. When I first learned to meditate when I was 19 years old, and I was so anxious. And so I was desperate. I was desperate to get out of that anxious state.
Mm.
And as succinctly as I can say it. And
Did
candid,
you ever figure out what caused that anxiety?
no,
Like, did it
no,
was it lifelong or was it you were in a period of it?
it was not lifelong. No, 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 no. That's what caught me by surprise. Like, totally caught me by surprise. It just, the phrase we say in English, we say it crept up on you. It crept up
Yeah,
on
it was
me.
gradual.
Yeah, it's so gradual. And the phrase crept up on you means that, it's like you imagine somebody it's actually creep up on you, and they're usually crawling on the ground, hiding. You don't
Yeah.
see it coming. That's what crept up on you means. And so I did not see the anxiety coming at all. So it was absolutely not a lifelong thing for me. And I know
Yeah.
for some people that who I help with their anxiety, it is. But no, you're asking me about personally me. No, it
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was just all of a sudden. And so no, I never, to answer your question, no, I never figured out why and it didn't interest me to figure out why. All it was is, like you said, you just want to be less anxious. And that's exactly how I was. I was just like, just get me out of this. And no,
Yeah.
that was it. And
Mhm.
I wasn't into analysis or anything. I had no interest in it. I just want, no, just get me out of here, out of this anxiety. And in the meditation, as you know the story with me, it did, and it helped, and it got me out of that state. And that's when I said this, interestingly, to a student. I'm teaching a couple of private classes now with just individual people to meditate. Um, not my monthly group class, in other words. So I just did a class the other day where I said, that's when my life began, was when my anxiety went away. And then I was talking to this person, this student of mine, who was in the midst of anxiety. So, they can't relate to what I'm saying, but I wanted to give them a long-term perspective and a little bit of inspiration and hope, because they're in the soup, as they say. They're in the middle of it. And their goal is, like you said, I just want to get their life goal is to not be anxious, because in this person's case, to your point, they have had it their whole life, and now
Yeah. Thank God I haven't.
they're 50 years old. So, I mean, it's like, so when you're that long, it's just, you just want it to stop. But I said to them I said, in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about the long-term benefits of the meditation that I teach. And what I realized, that when my anxiety stopped, that's when my life began. Then all kinds of things just took off, not just personally, but I mean, not just internally, but externally and professionally and educationally, and all kinds of stuff just took off in a much more positive way for me. Right. So I say that because um, I'm also the cup half full person to give people hope. Right. But that's beautiful. Thank you. Arnie. Yeah. You got to unmute yourself.
Okay. This is wonderful. And thank you, Susan. Thank you for sharing that as well. So I've dealt with anxiety all my life. I'm 63 years old this year. And I can't remember a time where I didn't experience anxiety. It's almost like ringing in the ears. You don't even realize it's happening until all of a sudden you go, oh shit, it's happening. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I've been doing a lot of soul searching on it, and I've been able to orchestrate a pretty wonderful life despite it. So I never let it become a constraint. But I was always aware of it. I just had to battle through it. I think my question to you, Kelvin, is this. So, I've recently, there are no coincidences in life, right? So I meet you about a week or so ago through my wife. You introduced your purple book. You introduced all your books to me, but the purple one about Marcus Aurelius. Interestingly enough, I started getting Marcus Aurelius feeds in my YouTube channel about 2 months ago, right? So, and I started paying a lot of attention to the Stoics, and Marcus Aurelius being probably one of the more obvious ones, or more I don't know, famous ones or recognizable ones. Doesn't he suggest that seeking happiness is futile? And isn't there, because and the reason I say that is because I've identified that there are basically three things that I believe make me happy, and I'm trying to divorce myself of those three things because I believe that they're futile desires. I think that they're self-serving desires. So in other words, I call it I'm in the AAA club. affection, attention, and admiration are three things that I feel bring me happiness, and that I don't get enough of them. I don't get enough of it from my wife. I don't get enough of it from my children. I don't get enough of it from my employees. I don't get enough of it from my boss. I am in a constant state of needing to feed the beast. And so I have been on this journey to almost divorce myself from the things that I believe bring me happiness, because I believe it's a futile journey. And that's why Marcus Aurelius kind of speaks to me, and the Stoic philosophies tend to speak to me. So, like, what do you make of that, Kelvin?
So here's the thing. You want to talk about Marcus, and then we'll come back and talk about the principles that you just mentioned, the affection, attention, admiration, sources of happiness that you perceive in yourself as needing to have. First of all, Marcus was absolutely, if you look at the way Marcus wrote, and first of all, understand that you're talking about the meditations, what's called meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Those are a collection of his self-reflections about himself, right? A lot of people think that he wrote a book, or he didn't write any book. Somebody collected a bunch of his ideas, his self-reflections about himself. It was like his personal meditation. So I'm kind of using the word meditations, but Marcus Aurelius updated 21st century meditations on living life. I'm using it not in the eyes closed, do a meditation process definition of meditation. I'm using it more in this generic way of reflecting, like he did. That's why I'm using it in the subtitle of my book that way. In the way that he did, he was self-reflecting. Somebody collected these self-reflections, they put it together, they collected them in around 800 AD, and somebody around in the 1700s collected and put it into a book form. And then they started calling it Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. All right. But if you think about the ideas there, to answer your question, he was talking about happiness. He didn't talk about he may not use the word, but everything he was self-reflecting on was to improve the quality of his life. And that's what I'm referring to now as happiness. So this is an example of my soul, my consciousness, my personality expressing itself in a different way over thousands of years. So, right? For those people who don't know, we'll just cut to the chase. And people who haven't read my third book yet, or if you haven't seen any podcasts of my on YouTube about me, I remember being Marcus Aurelius. Okay, so those are my self-reflections from 2,000 years ago, and these are my self-reflections from the 21st century. That's what this book is. Okay, and if you look at the back of the book, and if you look right there, this book cover that my daughter designed, you look right here, you look very carefully, most people will see two images there, but there are three images there. Go there and look carefully. And there's three images of the same person whose personality has continued through thousands of years. So, but back to this principle of happiness. He was talking about happiness, just not using the word happiness. And talking about it in the way that I'm using today, as still talking about how can you live a better life? That's what he's talking about. And to me, living a better life, living a life of more inner contentment, is how I started out the session today talking about. That is happiness. And that's what all the Stoics sought anyway, if you really think about it. Stoicism is really a misunderstood philosophy in today's a lot of lay people use the phrase being a stoic, and being a stoic usually means for most people is being unemotional. The Stoics were not saying that emotions are bad, that you should be unemotional. Do you think Marcus Aurelius was not sad when 9 of his 15 children died before they were aged 10? Of course he was sad, right? So it's not about that. It's about having perspective when stuff like that happens. And then to what extent can one's perspective shift and change one's experience of life? That's really what he was talking about. Now, have I changed since I was, 2,000 years before that lifetime? Well, have I changed? Yes. Have I changed from 100 years before that lifetime as Marcus? Yes. And have I changed since then to my current lifetime? Yes. Now, does everybody change and move forward in a healthier direction? Not necessarily. Some people stay stagnant. I'd say most people do, sadly. And then, sadly, I say, out of my empathetic heart says, sadly, I think most people don't change much, if at all. And can some people move in an unhealthier way? Yes, they can. That's why I teach the way I teach. I teach principles to try to help people move forward in a healthier way, in a more expansion of consciousness way, a way that wakes up more of their internal mind that to itself, that, to use Susan's term, to increase our state of well-being. That's what I teach. That's what I promote. But I want to make a comment, Arnie, and you can come back and ask more if you need to, about your affection, attention, and admiration. I scribbled down what you wrote. That you have this need, and it's a legitimate need. You shouldn't beat yourself up about it. That's my advice, first of all, number one. But the however is how you are looking at it may need to shift in a healthier way. In a healthier, what do I mean by healthier? In a way that's more self-affirming to you. That's what I mean by healthier in this context. In a more self-affirming way to you that helps you, propels you move forward, as opposed to limits you and cramps you, because that's what I'm feeling from you when you say this, that you need to feed this beast, but you use the phrase that you try to, I can't remember the exact words, I didn't scribble it down, but basically you're squelching it, that you do your best to divorce yourself from these. No, the thing is, it's your perspective though. And the thing is, you're looking for, and most people will do this. This is not I'm not personally picking on you, Arnie. We have a relationship, friendship, but I know you can take it. Just for those
of course,
people who don't know that you and I have a personal friendship. I just want to say that so that they think, well, he's beating up on Arnie. No, he isn't. So the thing is, you're looking at it from an external, the external sources of meeting that need. It needs to come from inside. It's the inside out approach, I call it. The inside out approach is the way to fulfill those desires that you have. Inside out. Once you go inside first, and I'll explain to you what I mean by that, because there's a couple of different nuances to the inside approach. Once you go inside, then the external will take care of itself. What do I mean by take care of itself? It'll either happen, like the kids and the wife and the boss and the employees and whatever, will start responding to you differently, or the need for them to do so will dissipate.
Mm.
Right? Now, because feeding ourselves from the inside. So what did I mean? Let me give you a couple of nuances in terms of the inside approach. So the inside approach is basically, I distill it down. This you could get into a whole bunch of different areas of this, but I'll distill it simply down to two areas when I talk about the inside approach. What do I mean by that? One is turning within, like in the meditation that I teach, for example, something that's easy, effortless, and you can turn within and connect with oneself in a different way than it's just thought. Okay? So it's not thinking differently, it's experiencing ourselves in a more expanded way than the limited way that we've been experiencing ourselves. I'll just leave it at that. But the other nuanced aspect of that is shifting your thinking. And that's what we're doing in these sessions. But these sessions alone are only part of the solution. Okay? But it's an important part. I'm not saying it's not important. It's very important to shift our thinking so that the alignment of our thinking is not cognitively dissonant. And those of you, you've been in any of my classes, you hear me use that phrase a lot. And for those of you who don't know what that phrase means, cognitively dissonant means, cognitive means thinking, dissonant means it doesn't go together, right? So cognitively dissonant means the thinking doesn't work. It doesn't go together. You're thinking this and you're thinking that, and they really don't make sense together. That's what cognitively dissonant means. And people do that all the time. In all areas, politics, religion, spiritual thought, child rearing, I mean, it's kind of nonsensical thinking, we could call it. I call it cognitive dissonance is everywhere. But if we can catch ourselves, and again, nobody's perfect at any of this, okay? But if we can catch ourselves more internally, again, the reason I was talking about this is the internal nuance of the internal, a nuance of the internal approach. We look inside ourselves and say, okay, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Well, maybe I should get rid of that thought process that I've been going through like this, because that doesn't really go with this. That's what I talked about at the beginning of today, of aligning our desires, our thoughts, actions, and our behavior. Lining that up, then you fulfill your desires. But back to you, Arnie. You got to go inside first. Inside first. So it's expanding our conscious capacity. That's one aspect. And the other is shifting the thinking and aligning the thinking and so forth, and getting rid of the, sometimes I use a phrase, getting rid of the broken deck chairs on the deck of the ship. The ship is like our mind in the analogy, and the deck chairs are like our thoughts and our belief systems and our thought patterns and so forth and so on. Some of them are broken. Some of them don't work. Well, get rid of those. Those are the deck chairs you get rid of, right? So the approach then, if you use the ship analogy, is don't just fix the deck chairs and get rid of the broken ones. Expand the deck too. That's the expanding the conscious capacity of the mind. That's the other aspect of the nuanced internal approach, okay, that I talk about. Need to do both. Then that's going to increase our happiness tenfold, 100-fold. We take that dual approach, if you will. Does that help, Ernie? Arnie?
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
It does. Very much so. It's definitely, so I understand everything you're saying, and it helps a whole bunch. I think what I've wrestled with of late, again, going back to the whole anxiety thing, are the frustrations that I've had attempting to get into meditative state, attempting to focus on the internal, and being frustrated and imprisoned by the anxieties, the doubts, just constantly arguing with people in my head, having conversations that I anticipate might exist someday in the future, those types of things. And I can't seem to. So let me give you a thought that I've been wrestling with lately. So, the whole idea of vibrational attraction and what you think about, you bring about, and all of those elements. And I go, okay, I'm constantly in a state of affirmations, right? So I'm always in a state of affirmations. I'm always using the term I am and thinking about what follows the word I am, right? And so I'm constantly conscious of those things. And I found myself recently saying, well, maybe one of the reasons why you keep attracting shit into your life, pardon my French for those of you who are offended by how we speak in Philadelphia, is that I'm realizing that on the surface, what I'm trying to do is muffle the noise of my doubt. But what I'm really doing is focusing on the doubt. I'm speaking about the positive. I am making my declarations and my affirmations about what I want to attract in my life, and the relationships that I want to have, and the job prospects that I want to have, and those types of things. And I realized the more I'm thinking about those things, the more I realize that the reason I'm thinking about them is because of how present the negative element is. And so I'm trying to put out a 5-alarm fire with a wet washcloth.
Well, not only are you trying to put out a 5-alarm fire with a wet washcloth, but you have a wet washcloth in one hand and you have a can of gasoline in the other hand. That's actually correct. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. And here's what's going on with you. I'll kind of distill it down because I've seen this pattern many, many times. And what you're doing is a very, very common pattern. It's just what most people's knee-jerk is, their default. This is their default pattern, and it's incorrect. Obviously, as you're sharing with us candidly, it doesn't work. And so the notion of thinking that, oh, I'm great, I'm doing great, I'm doing great. I'm a cup half full guy. I'm a cup half full guy. When you're not. It's all that does is shine a bigger light on the lack. All that
Right.
It's making the lack bigger. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the equivalent of, I say sometimes, and those of you who've been in some of my other classes, you've heard me say this: you cannot not think about something that you don't want to think about. Right? You cannot say, I am not going to think about the word hippopotamus. And then it's everybody, if I told you, you've all thought about it. Now you think, well, why does Kelvin think about hippo? Why does he say hippopotamus? Yeah, you cannot stop thinking about the word hippopotamus now. You cannot try not to do something. Trying always creates more activity in the mind. It just creates more thought about what you're saying you don't want to think about. Okay?
That's a fact. Yep.
That's a fact. And so my approach to helping people with that is completely different. Right? That goes to the meditation process. That's why that aspect of what I'm referring in this conversation we're having, this mini conversation you and I are having, I'm referring to as the two-pronged approach, the two-pronged nuanced approach to this internal, the internal approach to things, as opposed to externalizing and trying to manifest the affection, the attention, the admiration externally. Instead, turning within. That the meditative aspect to that is how to experience that expansion of the conscious capacity of the mind without trying to experience the conscious capacity of the mind. Because if you try to, you're going to be limiting yourself into what a psychology professor that I've been borrowing his analogy for the last 50 years from, he called the 8-inch bucket part of our mind. You're just going to trap yourself. So you're feeling, everything you just expressed, Arnie, is an expression that I've heard thousands of times from my thousands and thousands of students, where they feel trapped. They're trapped in the 8-inch bucket, what he called, the psychology professor called, the 8-inch bucket part of their mind. And what I teach people to do is how to get out of that. How do you get out of that? And once you get out of that, then you start to develop the flexibility and the adaptability, and we'll just use a simple layperson English word, the space to start to consider ideas and concepts and thinking about and shifting our thinking about stuff, right? But until you really have enough space to do that, it's more clutter in the little 8-inch bucket that you're trapped. Your mind just think it's trapped in, and it thinks it's trapped in it. You have done a good job thinking that you're trapped in it. That was one of Marcus's things that he talked about 2,000 years ago, is that it's an illusion that you think. Now, you read the beginning. Did you read the beginning where I compared some of the things and I gave you my interpretation of what he was saying at the beginning in chapter 1? In chapter 1 in this book.
You're going to expose me here as not having read the book yet.
Oh, I thought you started it. Sorry.
I told you I left it in the back of my car on my rush to the airport.
Okay, but I thought you had started reading at least a little bit. But anyway,
no, I never got to it. It was gonna be. Well, I'm glad I said to myself, I'm going to read it on the airplane, but now I realize that it's not an easy read. You got to take like 4 years to read that thing, one page at a time.
Well, it's not that you got to take 4 years to read it. My friend Kathy Mason will tell you, and I've been on her podcast, Jesus, I don't know, half a dozen times. She'll tell you she's probably read the book 2 or 3 or 4 times, but keeps rereading it, and she'll just reread the thing. So my friend Adam yesterday, who I had lunch with, he was saying he was reading it really slowly. But you can read it slowly, or you can read it and then reread it and then reread it. And the thing is, I wrote this. These are my ideas, and I reread it, and I go, "Wow, that's really interesting." Yeah, no, that's like, and I wrote the book. So anyway, but no, I was just referencing the fact that Marcus did talk about some of the principles that we're talking about 2,000 years ago in his own self-reflections, and then I gave my commentary on some of his what he wrote 2,000 years ago. So it's a little wonky talking about him and I and me and third person, first person, but you get the idea. So, but yeah, affirmations. You see, I don't want people to walk away thinking that I'm knocking affirmations. I am not knocking the concept of practicing or having saying affirmations to yourself. What I'm saying is, if we'll use the psychology professor's analogy, the 8-inch bucket analogy. If your mind is just still only limited to the 8-inch bucket part of itself and has not realized an experience, not just intellectually realized that it's a possibility, but has not started to experience itself outside that little 8-inch bucket part of itself, then an affirmation is just going to be more ping pong balls. In his analogy, he said your thoughts and emotions and feelings and experiences, in his analogy, he said, were like ping pong balls in this little bucket. You're just putting more ping pong balls into a bucket that's already small and crowded. You just stick another affirmation in, another affirmation. And then once you got too many affirmations, now you're like, oh, it's like I got 100 ping pong balls in a bucket that should only have about 10 or 15. It doesn't make you feel good. It makes you feel bad. This is like an unhappiness root. Okay,
Yeah.
that's why the expansion of the capacity and getting out of the mind and therefore getting out of the bucket, those people who've taken any of my classes know exactly what I'm talking about, is an integral part. They have to go hand in hand. So there's not one and it's not the other either. It's not, you cannot, the other thing is this. Let's just talk about meditation per se. You can't just sit around and meditate and expand your conscious capacity and still walk around with the ideas, the principles that we talked about at the beginning of the session today that don't mash up. You know, because then your behavior is going to be all screwy. You're going to be doing all kinds of weird, not you, Arnie, but we will be doing all kinds of screwy behavior externally because our thoughts and emotions are like this. They're all like a pretzel. They're not lining up and create fulfillment of our desires. And so that's the acid test for people. You got to look, are your desires being fulfilled? Are you living a life that is in alignment with the way you portray yourself to the world? Because there's a lot of people out there who portray themselves in a certain way, and they can they can really do a good job acting it out. But, you know, are they leaving people in their wake in a mess? Oh, they're very empathetic, very caring person. But then you look behind them and say, wait a minute, it's a mess. They just left this person in the wake because a mess. They left that person in the wake of the mess. Well, wait a minute. What's going on here? Okay. So it's not just, I mean, and that person may be a meditator. I have friends, I have old friends. I have I know people over many lifetimes, including this lifetime, male and female. Okay. Well, it's gender non-specific. It's age non-specific, who I've encountered over the years, who have left people in the wake, you know, in their wake. And yet they are devout meditators doing whatever, whether it's a process like what I teach or some other form of meditation. They're very self-development oriented is what my point is. And yet their thinking and their emotions are really maligned, not lined up well. So that's why I say it's a two-pronged approach. You can't just sit in the cave and meditate and do your self-development stuff and your chanting and your bell ringing and your whatever else stuff.
You have to focus on your relationships with other people too.
Well, that relationships with the other people are a good metric. That's the way I would say it, Susan. But yeah, that it's where we as humans, I think most humans is, you know, there's an occasional handful of humans who could just live by themselves and never be people. But we're very social. I think we're very social entities, human beings. And so you're right. The relationships are very important. But in the context of what I'm saying is, that's a good metric. How are the relationships? As an external person, you're looking at it. You know, look at that other person. Look, how are their relationships? Even though they say this, that, and the other thing, and they purport to be this, that, and the other thing kind of person. How are their relationships? Right? So Susan and then Arnie, go ahead.
Well, I want to ask, can I ask Arnie a question?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. This is, thank you. Before you ask the question, I hope you don't forget it. Let me say, this is like somebody asked me, can you develop like a spiritual community sessions is what she called it. That's Chelsea first called me. He was talking to one of my students. So I want you guys to interact with each other if you feel like it, even offline. So go ahead. Yeah, it's up to you.
Arnie, I'm curious if you said you've been anxious your whole life. When I was talking about myself being anxious, I was going to say that I assume that a person who was anxious their whole life wouldn't know they were anxious. So my question to you is, how did you know you were anxious if that's the only state of mind that you ever knew?
Because there's this feeling of unsettled, nervousness. You want to vomit sometimes. You just you wake up with this pit in your stomach, and it's there. It's like, and it's one of those things. Like I said, it's like tinnitus. That ringing in your ears, like you don't realize it until you're in complete silence that there's the ringing. And so, but when there's noise around, it's not so prevalent. So I'm able to shift my attention off of it at times. But I can go back as far as I can remember in this meat suit that I'm in, and I haven't yet gotten in touch with any of the previous meat suits. This is where Kelvin and I began our relationship. But as far back as I can remember, just waking up every morning, being sick to my stomach about what might happen that day.
But so it sounds like you're saying that you had enough moments where you didn't feel that way, that you were able to be aware of the contrast.
Well, it's it's one of those things where you're able to be distracted from it. It's anyone with chronic pain will tell you that there are moments where it's more evident than it isn't, right? But yet they know it's there. And it's just a matter of attention. When I put my when I stop and realize, when I stop for a moment, I can sense the anxiety. It's hard to explain, Susan. It's and I appreciate the question. Again, it's just something. And interestingly enough, all my brothers, they suffer from it. Two of my kids suffer from it. My one of my children, I remember when she was 6 years old, just waking up anxious, nervous, throwing up on the soccer field. We thought she was sick. We thought she had the flu. And it's just one of those things. Anyway,
but if that, the saying that a fish doesn't realize that they're in water. Like, did you ever hear that conversation?
I've never heard that phrase, but it's awesome.
Somebody says to a fish, like, how do you like the water that you're in? And the fish says, what water? Because they're so they've never not been in water. They don't realize they're surrounded by water. So what I'm trying to understand from you is, if you've always been anxious, why did you not just take it for granted that that's normal? What made you think that there was such a thing as not feeling that way?
I suppose it's because I was able to experience moments of peace and joy and contentment and happiness in my life. And I went, oh, that's what it's supposed to feel like.
Wow, that brings tears to my eyes, just thinking about the experience that you would have had in those moments. Like, wow, this is the way life could be.
That's the way it could be. And
experience.
I found my place in theater growing up, because I wasn't an athlete, and so I had to find a way to meet girls, and it was I didn't the chess club guys weren't getting any action, so I went to the
you were already pursuing affection, attention, and admiration.
Yeah, there you go. So I went to the theater, and whenever I was performing, I was elated. That's where I really felt. I knew that there was something more, and I suppose, you hear these stories like about Robin Williams. how could a guy who brought so much joy to so many people experience so much pain within himself that it wasn't even worth living anymore? And let me tell you something, when I heard that story, I went, yeah, I get that shit. I get it. Like, I get it.
Look, a lot of people don't realize, and it's not true of all comedians, but many, many, many comedians come from, they draw from a lot of pain.
From pain. Yeah.
Yeah. And understanding for them, their gift in a weird way is to understand, the really good ones anyway, is to understand how to express that on stage, the line where the pain starts and stops, and that's what, and that's how you create these comedic moments,
Yeah.
So, yeah, but no, that's it's interesting. Arnie, you said you had something else you wanted to.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, I was going to tell you, I'm personally running out of time, so I was wondering. I don't want to.
We're gonna close this in a minute, but I also want to check, Maddie or Connie, anything you want to share? Anybody else? I know there's a bunch of people on Facebook, but I can't see. I just been getting texts from people who are watching the Facebook, but
Yeah, I think happiness is just being present in the moment and doing what you want to do.
being present, that's a beautiful way of saying it also, Connie. Yeah. Being present in the moment. Yeah. Yeah, which is what we often don't do. We're not often present in the moment. And that's a Marcus thing, Arnie. That's
Yeah.
very much a Marcus thing. Yeah. Being present in the moment, Connie. Thank you for that. Yeah.
And then doing what you want to do, like no matter what it is, if it's exercising or reading a book or like
I get it, Connie. But I got to tell you, and I don't want this to sound like a downer or anything. When you're in a constant state of fear and doubt,
I've been as a kid.
Yeah, I mean it's really difficult to cut through that. And for me, fighting off fear and doubt is I mean it's a big dragon for me. Like it's tough sometimes in the morning to fight off fear and doubt.
Connie, you want to comment on how the meditation has helped you in that respect?
Yeah, the meditation it just makes me go inside and just being like I'm going through all the rooms in my mind, but I just sit still. It just brings me peace.
Peace.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It brings, because Connie, without getting into all the details, Arnie, Connie has been through a lot in the last, let's just say year and a half, 2 years, Connie. Right? And
Right.
Connie's been meditating for, she's been going on for a lot for more than that. But I mean, it's really been intense recently for her. And I can't remember when I taught you to meditate, but it's really, you've told me how much it has helped you through that.
Right.
Well, I gotta get to that place, and I'm hoping Kelvin that I'm gonna figure out how to connect. Like I gotta find out, where do I connect with you? What's the medium that I connect with you where I can begin to understand how do I go deep within myself? How do I still my mind?
That's the thing. How do you get rid of your anxiety is the bottom line. That's the issue. So that's what I can teach you how to do that. So that's easy for me to do. Easy. Right? That's what I do. It's one of the many things. Yeah.
And I'm from Philadelphia too, Arnie.
Are you in Philly?
On July 2nd. I live in Sacramento, California now, but
yeah.
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 And Maddie's in Philadelphia too. Maddie, do you want to say anything? You want to share anything? It's up to you. No need to, but just giving you the option before we end the session today.
I really like it.
Good.
It's been harder now that my sister passed.
Yeah, since Maddie's sister passed, the meditation has really helped you, huh, Maddie? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, I'm touched, Maddie, so much by hearing that from you because I know how difficult it's been for you and your mom and the whole family that your sister died in that accident. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Maddie. So good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you in a month and we'll discuss another topic and we'll see, where what direction that takes us. Because as I said, this is an open forum. I'll speak for, 20, 30 minutes or something, and we'll open it up and see what people's different ideas and experiences are in these principles that we're going to be introducing and helping us move forward with our lives in a little bit more productive, effective way towards what we call inner contentment and peace, and to use Susan's phrase, the increasing our well-being, right? I love that. So
Yeah.
we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Calvin. I really like that.
Oh, good, Maddie. That's great. Awesome. Really glad to hear that.
Thank you.
You're really glad to hear that. Good to see you, Maddie. I'll talk to you again soon, okay?
On Friday.
That's right. I'll talk to you Friday. All right.
Yeah.
Take care. I'll see you.